Take a look at this fursuit. It looks nothing like the colorful, carefully crafted costumes the furry community is known for. Instead, this is one patchwork monstrosity. Mismatched fur stitched and glued together with seams bulging and eyes uneven. The entire thing resembles more of a crime scene experiment than a costume. You almost imagine you can smell it through the screen. Stale urine, sweat, decay. The kind of smell that, according to those who met him in person, could clear out a room in seconds. This furry is known as Carpet Sample. For years, he haunted conventions and online forums alike, a literal walking nightmare stitched together from discarded toys he first used for his own sick pleasures. He became a figure whispered about in fandom circles, a man who didn't just disturb people online with words, but showed up in real life, terrifying anyone unlucky enough to cross his path. He was banned from multiple conventions after harassing attendees, once even propositioning a woman's service dog in an elevator. In his own words, he bragged about acquiring pets specifically to abuse them, and when he wasn't tormenting animals, he was allegedly vulnerable minors with promises of alcohol and attention. Carpet Sample wasn't simply eccentric. He wasn't just another oddball in a subculture already famous for strange behavior. He was something else entirely that is hard to explain even for us. He is a predator hiding in plain sight, one whose stench, both literal and figurative, left scars on those who encountered him. So the question becomes, who is this man beneath the patchwork fur? What hides beneath the mess of a fursuit? A master manipulator, an abuser, or a living nightmare who turned the furry fandom into his hunting ground? Today we'll tell you the story of Carpet Sample. And as you'll realize, the deeper we dig, the worse it gets. You see, to understand the furry Carpet Sample, you have to start with the man behind it, William Clark, better known across his countless online aliases as Shadow Wolf S. Unlike many furries who carefully cultivated their online personas to escape the mundanity of everyday life, Bill blurred every line between fantasy and what's real. He wasn't just hiding behind a fursona, no. He was his fursona, and he wanted the world to know it. On his profiles, he rarely concealed his real identity. He openly listed his name, his age, and his interests, often with shocking levels of candor. In his own bio, written nearly 2 decades ago, Bill introduced himself as a 51-year-old bisexual furry and self-described plushophile. He bragged about creating his own art and offering commissions cheap or free, not out of generosity, but because he craved validation and attention. His chosen persona was as grotesque as the man himself, a sickening anal beast, described in disturbing detail on forums like Encyclopedia Dramatica, where he was mocked as a meth-head Steve Buscemi with a twisted imagination to match his appearance. But what set him apart wasn't just the lurid things he posted online. It was how he constructed a physical presence that embodied his disturbed fantasies. While most fursuit makers poured thousands of dollars and hundreds of hours into their craft, Bill scoured thrift stores, pawing through discarded plush toys. These toys, by his own admission, were his sexual partners first. Only afterward did he rip them apart, skinning them for their fabric, and crudely gluing the scraps into a makeshift suit. The result was unlike anything the furry community had seen before, a patchwork Frankenstein-like monstrosity. People who have seen this close-up describe it as overpowering, a nauseating mix of urine, sweat, and decay that could fill an entire room. Convention-goers claimed that when Bill entered a space, people instinctively moved away, clearing whole areas because the stench was so unbearable. One witness even said the odor hung in the air like a light, making it impossible to ignore him even if you wanted to. Holy crap, I also had a very weird and creepy encounter with him. He stalked me, trying to constantly get my attention. Also, he smelled strongly of piss and told me Hannibal Lecter was his hero. Edit. Oh, and just so you know, he wasn't just trolling. He had his fursuit head off this whole time and he was clearly a disturbed guy. I remember him looking a lot like Steve Buscemi on meth. Visually, the suit was no less disturbing. Fur colors clashed wildly, greens, purples, yellows, all stitched together in nonsensical patterns. The seams bulged, foam protruded unevenly, and the head looked caved in, as though it had been smashed with a hammer on purpose. His furry costume has been described as a zombie apocalypse fursuit, and likened cotton candy left to rot in a sewer. Even with a fandom known for eccentric costumes, this one stood out as something fundamentally wrong. To many, this was the physical manifestation of Bill's perversions, stitched together from the remnants of his victims, both inanimate and alive. By the mid-2000s, photos of this suit began circulating online. Some appeared on his now-deleted Flickr page, alongside crude, hand-drawn graphic art he produced in crayon. Others surfaced through sites like Fur Affinity and smaller image boards, where his work was shared as both a curiosity and a warning. The name Carpet Sample began spreading, mocking him for his patchwork appearance, yet ensuring his infamy within the fandom. This was the birth of his persona. Not just a man with disturbing hobbies, but a living urban legend. Carpet Sample became a symbol of everything that could go wrong in a community already battling for mainstream acceptance. And while some thought his notoriety might fade into obscurity, this was only the beginning. Bill wasn't just content to live online. He wanted to take Carpet Sample out into the real world, into convention halls, crowded elevators, and dim hotel alleys where his presence could no longer be ignored. Ladies and gentlemen, the nightmare was only just beginning, because Bill's process was unlike anything anyone had ever seen or wanted to see. You see, the fursuit is a symbol of creativity in the furry fandom, a wearable work of art that brings a character to life. For many, it's a labor of love, carefully crafted with fur, foam, and fabric. But for William Clark, it was something much darker, an extension of his twisted desires. The suit also became inseparable from his reputation. It wasn't just ugly, it carried the aura of everything people whispered about him online, like we mentioned earlier in the video. Rumors of zoophilia, stories of grooming minors, first-hand accounts of harassment, all of it wrapped up in a costume that reeked both literally and metaphorically. To see Carpet Sample was to confront a living embodiment of the fandom's darkest rumors, an urban legend made flesh. This was a predator, proudly parading his sickness in broad daylight. And while the costume was horrifying enough on its own, what Bill did outside of it was far worse. And at the heart of it was plushophilia, a fixation with stuffed animals that became his preferred outlet long before he turned them into a costume. Bill was not coy about this fact. In fact, he openly identified as a plushophile on furry forums, treating it as if it were just another kink within the community. He boasted about his methods, collecting stuffed toys from secondhand shops, taking them home and violating them before tearing them apart. He would speak of a particular 3-foot-tall St. Bernard plush, detailing in graphic language how he modified it with toys and fillers to suit his needs. To him, these were not inanimate objects, they were partners. And when he was finished, he didn't simply discard the toys. Their mutilated remnants became raw material. He skinned them, cut them into irregular pieces, and glued them together, layering fur like a macabre quilt. Each patch held a history, a reminder of what had been done to it. To the outside world, this resulted in the infamous fursuit. To Bill, it was just an extension of his private rituals, a trophy he could wear. The obsession wasn't confined to his workshop. He documented it obsessively online, writing testimonials on message boards and forums about his relationships with plush toys. He described sensations, techniques, and even offered advice to others who might want to follow in his footsteps. In one chilling post, he explained how he altered the tightness of a plush toy, his beloved St. Bernard plushie, by adjusting its stuffing, proudly declaring it felt better than any real woman. Plush toys became companions, canvases, and eventually costumes. Bill's fixation on them blurred all boundaries, transforming a childish symbol of comfort into something hard to comprehend, much more explain. But plushophilia was only the half of it. Behind the lurid fascination with toys lurked darker compulsions. The thing is, his behavior stopped from being a private fixation and became a threat to the people and animals around him. He didn't just admit to zoophilia, he celebrated it. He wrote openly about his preference for large dogs, calves, ponies, even goats, detailing what he had done and what he still hoped to do. He bragged about being knotted by his Great Dane, describing the experience in detail. He even fantasized about acquiring specific breeds like huskies just to act on his compulsions. There were photographs of his pets, thin and neglected, trapped in hoarder-like conditions. Floors littered with trash, newspapers piled high, stains caked into the carpet. His dogs looked anxious, forced to live in filth. Witnesses who had encountered him in person also recalled the overwhelming impression that he was unstable and dangerous. And then came the stories from conventions. In 2007, he appeared at Anthrocon, his foul-smelling patchwork suit immediately drawing attention. Witnesses described the odor as so strong it cleared entire rooms, forcing organizers to step in. But it wasn't just the stench. People also remembered his behavior. He would approach strangers and, unprompted, begin explaining how he built his fursuit out of stuffed animals he had already used. The grotesque confession turned casual small talk into horror stories retold for years afterward. One victim, whose friend was unlucky enough to meet him in person, recounted their encounter, saying they'd run into the now-defunct Oclocon, and the whole kit and caboodle was on display, and without any prompting, he went ahead to tell them about his process for making the fursuit. Then there was 2008. Several attendees recounted being followed by him through the downtown streets near Anthrocon. What started as an unwanted conversation turned into stalking, and he trailed them into alleyways, only breaking off after security intervened. For those who lived it, it was pure terror. At other events, the pattern repeated. At the now-defunct Oclocon, people remembered the same themes. The smell, the suit, the rambling, disturbing monologues. But what truly made him a menace was his inability to respect boundaries. One infamous incident occurred in an elevator with a handicapped attendee and her service dog. Carpet Sample reportedly propositioned her, making sexual comments about her companion animal. It was shocking enough to earn him a ban, one of several that would eventually make him a pariah across convention circuits. Even without direct harassment, his mere presence carried menace. Witnesses described him as looking like Steve Buscemi on meth, gaunt, twitchy, his eyes darting around behind the collapsed mask of his fursuit. People whispered that he was unpredictable, someone who could snap at any moment. For many, running into him at a con was the highlight of a nightmare they couldn't wake up from. Among the countless disturbing claims surrounding Carpet Sample, perhaps none cemented his infamy more than the allegations of pedophilia. If the bizarre fursuits and zoo-related confessions painted him as grotesque, these revelations solidified his place as one of the most reviled figures in online history. One of the most damning accusations came from reports that he had solicited a minor for in exchange for alcohol. The story has circulated across archived forums and testimonies. While going under one of his many aliases, Shadow Wolf S offered alcohol to an underage fan if they would meet him. This was not cloaked in ambiguity. It wasn't a joke. It was as direct as it was incriminating, and it displayed the same reckless lack of boundaries that defined nearly everything he did online. To some, this became the smoking gun that proved his depravity wasn't limited to bizarre hobbies or his art or his animal abuse fantasies. It extended to exploiting actual human children, something that has also been regularly depicted in his deranged art too. Like this drawing of over-the-hedge character Stella, that was supposed to depict her as a small child. Comments from online forums suggest that these drawings revealed an inhibition within him that left him attracted to children. Archived logs from platforms like forums, instant messengers, and early social networks painted an even more chilling picture. Carpet Sample wasn't just passively disturbing, he was actively predatory. The behavior in these logs followed a consistent script. He would begin with casual friendliness, minors with compliments or feigning mentorship, before slowly steering the conversation into sexual territory. The brazenness of these logs were so shocking and indefensible. What emerges from these allegations is a disturbing through line. Carpet Sample's entire existence revolved around the pursuit of victims, be they plush toys, animals, or people. He cycled through them with the same warped obsession, treating each new conquest as a way to feed a bottomless appetite. To him, the plush suits he cobbled together, the dogs he allegedly abused, and the minors he targeted were all part of the same continuum. His compulsions knew no limits, and he made no effort to hide them. By the time these allegations spread through communities like Encyclopedia Dramatica and furry forums, his reputation had calcified. Carpet Sample was no longer just an unpleasant individual in a disgusting fursuit, he was a predator. A man who blurred every boundary, leaving behind a legacy not just of repulsion but of genuine danger. And still he kept coming. He showed up year after year, even as bands mounted, determined to wear his abomination in public. Each time he added to the legend. The furry fandom has had its share of eccentric characters, but few reached the level of menace that William Clark brought with him. Conventions, which were supposed to be a refuge, became unsafe under his shadow, And while most people could laugh off the occasional oddball, no one laughed when Carpet Sample was around. His suit made people gag. Long before the conventions banned him, and long after his foul suit became a campfire story in the fandom, Carpet Sample's true legacy was cemented online. In the mid-2000s, furry spaces on forums, LiveJournal, and early social media platforms became the first place where stories of William Clark began to circulate. His many aliases, Shadowwolf S, Ron Mexico, Emerald Vixen, only added to the legend. No matter what name he chose, his writing gave him away. Sites like Encyclopedia Dramatica and Kiwi Farms picked up on the growing whispers and began archiving his activity. What's left is a scrapbook of his life, laid bare for anyone who dared to look. Even among the bizarre figures cataloged on those sites, Carpet Sample stood out as something uniquely horrifying. A man who mixed filth, obsession, and predation into one spectacle. Carpet Sample never achieved fame in the way he might have wanted, but he achieved something far more endearing: infamy. And in the digital age, that's forever. Every community has its villains, the figures who embody everything outsiders already fear about that space. For the furry fandom, that mantle fell squarely on the shoulders of Carpet Sample. He wasn't just another eccentric in a community full of eccentricity. He was the embodiment of every stereotype taken to its darkest extreme. To the outside world, furries already struggled against ridicule. Media portrayals painted them as deviant or strange, focusing on the most sensational aspects rather than the vibrant art, creativity, and friendships that define the community. And then William Carpet Sample Clark seemed determined to confirm every accusation critics had ever thrown at the fandom. Inside the fandom, he became something else entirely, a legend of what not to become. Whether mythologized or remembered in detail, one thing is certain: Carpet Sample's story will never truly disappear. He remains a permanent reminder that sometimes the darkest legends are not invented, they're real like you and me.